Thanks for checking out my video. Tonight in our walkthrough, or Wednesday walkthrough, we're going to cover actually a painting demo. Going to paint a scene that looks a little bit like this, although it's not going to be a seascape, it's going to be a landscape. This was a cover I recently did, a master copy, if you will, of a Isaacszoon van Ruisdael painting. Off the top of my head, I don't recall the name of the painting, but tonight we are going to cover another Isaacszoon Ruisdael painting, and we're going to have a little fun. Good way to kind of relax and get ourselves prepared for the coming days, coming weekend, that sort of thing. So if you're not familiar with who this artist is, I wasn't either, and I'd taken quite a few art history courses. Isaackszoon van Ruisdael. Don't know if I got that pronunciation correct. He was living back in 1629 and lived until 1682. He was a Dutch painter, draftsman, and etcher. According to the prestigious Wikipedia entry for him here, he was largely considered to be the preeminent landscape painter of the Dutch Golden Age, which was a period of great wealth and cultural achievement when Dutch painting became very popular. Prolific and versatile, Ruisdael depicted a wide variety of landscape subjects from 1646. He painted the Dutch countryside scenes of remarkable quality for a young man. After a trip to Germany in 1650, his landscapes took more of a heroic character. If you do a search for him on your favorite search engine, you'll find easy access to some pretty high quality images of his work. And I mean, he's done everything from these huge, wonderful landscapes to seascapes. The classic kind of Dutch landscape with windmills. And I would say one of the more notable characteristics associated with Ruisdael's paintings are his majestic cloudscapes. And from what I've read and heard, it seems like he painted primarily from within his studio. And I haven't spent a lot of time learning about his methods, so I'm kind of winging it, just really looking to have some fun and relax and kind of use my imagination to kind of guesstimate how it is he may have approached constructing his paintings. So we'll go ahead and get started. Just taking a little break this week from the walkthroughs of books, and we'll go ahead and do this little painting demo, master copy or a study of Isaacszoon Ruisdael painting here. Bear with me, I know my camera work is horrible. We're going to go ahead and make some adjustments here. Bear with me. It's going to go black here for a second. Come right back. So I will help out and provide you a summary of what's on my palette and everything else. And I fully anticipate we will not complete this painting in this sitting. So we'll just get a start in today. And hopefully you won't hold that against me. But I have in my sketchbook, I have black gesso on a relatively heavy grade sketch paper, so nothing fancy here. And let's see, I put out on my palette, I have two separate trays. Some of these colors may or may not have been available at the time of the artist, but I have titanium white, Payne's gray, ultramarine blue, India yellow. I have another tray with sap green, Van Dyke brown. We also have burnt umber, yellow ochre, and then alizarin crimson, and then another little puddle of titanium white. So I have that titanium white on both. So we're painting in oils. And I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get more of the surface within view. Here we go. And we're going to go ahead and start working on this painting. While I'm doing that, I'm going to share with you, I think in future sessions, I might do a walkthrough of Turner's drawing book. If you haven't checked this out or seen this, just incredible sketches, drawings, paintings, etchings, spotlighting the work that was done by J.W.M. Turner throughout his career. So I think, if not next week, soon after, I'll probably do a quick walkthrough of that book and then maybe some experimentation with some pencil drawings and watercolor. But for now, we'll go ahead and crank up the effort here to cover this Jacob Ruisdael painting. And I'm just bringing up an image on my iPad and we'll get started. So here is the painting, and I'll put the name of the painting and some more information about this painting in the show notes. You can see this is a landscape. There's some ruins, I think an old church, some distant hills. You have some pastures that are lit up with sky filtering through the clouds and these majestic clouds. So once again, this is probably one of the more common notable features in most of his landscapes and seascapes. So that is what drew me to them. I'll put an image of that picture up somewhere on my site, on my social sites. And what I'm going to do is get a little bit of linseed oil in here. I'm going to square off the surface because the format that he used is square. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll dip into my Payne's Gray and get a little oil on there. And I'm roughly going to square this off. This is not, when at least personally, when I approach master copies, my goal is just to get intuitively a sense for how a great master may have approached their painting. I want to engage my subconscious, my imagination. I don't want to be, like what Alton Brown is to cooking. I want to be completely intuitive and just get a feel for, maybe one way that you can get a similar outcome. So that's what I'm doing here. Okay, so roughly right, using materials that I have access to that are inexpensive. So here we go. We have the square format. We are going to reproduce this Jacob Ruisdael landscape painting. And if I have the presence of mind to do so, I'll share more about this specific painting during this live feed. I will tell you it's been a long day within a long week. I had some tryptophan supplements, so if I fall asleep, you might hear me snoring, but hopefully I don't put you to sleep too much. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just put in some of the major shapes that I see. And we're painting on this black surface. So I'm going to start with a little bit more of that Payne's Gray. And the horizon line is right about 2/3 down from the top. So that's right about there. And then there's a little space here for that pasture area. There's a little tilt to this, and then there's the mountain range in the background there, which is very subtle and off into the distance. And then the tree line here is going to come up and it's going to come down, And there's some rocks here. And there's another pasture that's just not lit up. It's kind of hidden. And some trees. Okay. And here we go. We're going to just get some suggestive lines in. So we have some guidelines to work with. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit, just using my brush, a little bit of my titanium white into my Payne's gray. And we're going to get a slightly lighter gray. And I'm going to use that to get some of my basic cloud shapes mapped out. Now, like a lot of great painters who have long careers, Ruisdael went through some phases. You heard me read from Wikipedia that he visited Germany in like 1850 or so, and it created, I guess it inspired in him some more what they call heroic landscapes. So you'll start to see some majestic castles and ruins and stormy seascapes, with these tall ships kind of making their way through these high seas and so forth. And they're remarkable. Later on in his career, Jacob Ruisdael, I guess, spent some time in the Alps. I'm not sure if it was the Swiss Alps or if it was in Italy or what have you. I have to read a little bit more up on that, but he started painting, incorporating huge mountain scenes, and those are fun to look at too. So what I hope to do is actually, as part of the broader long-term Study the Great series that I've embarked upon, cover a whole bunch of Jacob Ruisdael paintings. The great Dutch painters always have been a source of inspiration for me. Their portraiture work is just remarkable in my mind. I know very little about them, but I just know I like what I see. And we're going to try and cover more and more over time. So here we go. We have a lot of the major shapes in. You can see just roughed in. Looks nothing like it yet because we haven't played with color and we haven't refined the shapes and we've left some things out. But that's okay. And we might leave things out altogether. Who knows? There's a little castle here. We're going to get that in. Right here, you have those turrets. I may or may not keep those in. We'll see. We'll see how it all fits together. So I'm going to go ahead and get some linseed oil on this brush. I'm going to stick with this brush. I have some really beat up old brushes that I store in a solution of dish soap and water. And it really is hard on brushes. I mean, the shape of this brush is nowhere near what it originally was. And that's okay. I try to use that to my advantage for as long as they'll last. And I'm going to go ahead and wipe out some of this residual paint. We don't want the paint to get too muddy here. I'm going to start putting in some warmer colors, and I'm going to start working with a bigger brush. So I have this fan brush, and I think this will do the trick. Again, working intuitively. I just want to copy, in a way where I'm working intuitively, not scientifically. No crazy color theory, no crazy design theory, no, kind of super duper intense knowledge about brush strokes and different brushes. This is a fan brush and this is beat to snot. There's a little clinker hanging out there and that'll probably cause some frustrations, but maybe I could use that to my advantage. Who knows? So I just like this because it's going to cover a lot of this, and I want to use as little paint as possible and work as fast as possible. Thank you. I appreciate the information, the feedback there, warm and cozy in Caroline. We're going to go ahead and start like we do with all oil paintings. Start with our darks. So I'm going to go ahead and right within my palette here, I'm going to mix up, and I'm going to start with some of the land formations. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up a little bit of Van Dyke Brown. I'm just going to pull it out from the pile. A little bit of burnt umber. We got a little bit more linseed oil in there. A little bit of burnt umber. And a touch of sap green. Touch of sap green. Okay. If we get muddy colors, who cares? This is low risk. It's just a little bit of sketch paper and gesso. So low risk, not risking ruining any materials that are really expensive. No one's commissioning me for this, so this is just play. If it goes horribly wrong, I get a little embarrassed and frustrated and I go to sleep. No big deal. So I'm going to go ahead and put in some of these darker shapes. There's a kind of a band of trees in the mid ground here, mid distance, that are not lit by the sky, so they're a little darker. And then I'm going to work in a little bit of, let's see, a little bit of blue, but I'm going to wipe out this brush. A little bit of blue, I'm going to pull it out. And yes, there's still a little green in there, that's okay. I'm going to get some of my gray. And we're going to get a little bit of titanium white in there. And that's going to help color some of the mountains off in the distance. And I'm just going to get a little hint. And that's a little too light. So we're going to darken that a little bit. Wipe it out. Just a little too light. And I'm using a bigger brush than I probably should, and that's okay. Because again, we just want to cover ground, cover the surface as much as possible, and if we make a mess, we could always fix it. You know, this is one of the things about my process is it is wet on wet painting. So a lot of these greats would have, I historically, in my Study the Great series, have covered a lot of the turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s American landscape painters. And a lot of them are tonalists, and they would quite often use, a longer process where they would let paint dry. And, they might use scrumbles and glazes. And they might work on a painting for a long period of time. Any painting I'm doing, I'm trying to get done in one sitting, wet on wet. So this is really, really just an experiment. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come forward in the landscape. And I'm going to move down a little bit. And we're going to get probably initially some almost pure yellow ochre. And it's not going to match the color, but it is going to help match the value or the lightness and the intensity in this field that's lit up. And we could always adjust it later. We probably will. We're going to do the same here. There's a little patch of pasture that's lit up. I'll drag that across. And then there's a little teeny tiny bit of pasture off in the distance that's lit up. And don't worry, some of this is getting messy. We're gonna, I'm joking, I know you're not worried, but we're gonna straighten this out. Okay. We're gonna pull this down. We're gonna try and use lines to create the illusion that these fields are concave, not as opposed to convex. Try to kind of make the suggestion that maybe there's little stones and mounds within that field. Okay, now we're going to use the same brush and we are going to work in a little bit of Payne's Gray. We're going to pull it right out and it's going to be quite green. and that's okay. And then we'll add to it in just a bit, a little tinge of red. But what we want to do is account for, there's a little gray area here close to the foreground. It looks like it may be a pasture that's in shadow. And we just want to lay the groundwork for that. And if we're lucky, we'll get the little castle in and some of the subtleties within this scene. Looks like there's a little pathway in there that's hard to see because it is a smaller image of a big painting. Now I'm going to wipe this out, and we're going to get almost pure Payne's gray, maybe with a little bit of Van Dyke brown and blue. We want to create something that almost looks black. There we go. So we don't have black on the palette, but we want to create a color that looks black relative to the other colors. And an easy way to do that is to use burnt umber and ultramarine blue or Van Dyke brown that could be added to it. And we're just going to account for some of these areas that are amongst the darkest values in the painting. Just roughly right. Not looking for perfection at all. What's the point? Not going to do better than old Jacob. That's for sure. All right. A little bit of a diamond shape there. And there's going to be some trees indicated there and some light spots and other details. Now, this will also come down here like this. And there's going to be some trees and stuff here, and we'll account for that a little bit more accurately. Just want to get a layer of paint on here and even this out. And there's going to be a rock formation here. And then, so we have all this color covered. That's all I wanted to do at this point in time. We're going to refine this quite a bit. I want to work my way up into the sky. I want to get the surface covered as fast as I can. Okay, that's a trick that I've learned from a lot of instructors and fellow painters, and in a couple of workshops, how important that can be, especially if you feel tired, intimidated, if you're not inspired, if you're feeling anxious about having a blank canvas or painting in front of a group of people, even though it's a small group, get the canvas covered as fast as you can. All right, so I have a new brush, old but new, if you will, and I'm just going to play in grays for a little bit. I'm going to show you something before I get started. So what I love about his skies is this is probably, I looked through a couple, I think maybe a couple hundred of his paintings. This may be the second or third, if I were to rank order his paintings that have majestic skies like this, this might be the second or third painting in order of those that have the most blue in the sky. Most of his skies are dramatic. There's a lot of gray coverage, large cloud masses with some light filtering through, and different shades of gray, tinted throughout. So, no popcorn type clouds, no perfect blue sky days. And I kind of like that. I think it makes for interesting skies. So I am a lover of clouds, that's for sure. Clouds, I should say. Clouds, not clowns. Clouds, Clouds. Clowns, I really don't care for. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and mass in a mixture of Payne's gray and that brownish mixture that I have for the darker areas. And I might end up wiping a lot of this away. This is almost the reverse of how I'll paint probably more often than not with a white canvas. Sometimes when you're painting on a black surface like this, when values get too light, you could fix it by wiping off the paint or scraping off the paint, which is different. It's almost the opposite of what you would experience with a white canvas. So the white canvas, if you're putting in your initial drawing or you started blocking in shapes and you wanted to expose some lighter areas with a white canvas, you'd wipe it off. So just the opposite here. And again, what I'm looking to do is just get the surface covered as quickly as possible. More Van Dyke brown, a little bit more blue, and the Payne's gray. There we go, that's closer to what I want there. I'm going to leave some of those lines. It's not a coloring exercise, and I'm not looking to impress anybody. I'm just looking to learn my subconscious. So hopefully maybe someday if I'm out in the field, which is my favorite thing to do from a painting, from an art perspective, if I'm out in the field painting and I see beautiful arrangement of clouds like this, I'll have a sense for how to tackle it. You know, if there's some editing that I need to do to make a more interesting painting, I will have done this already. And even if I don't consciously, in my frontal lobes, if you will, the executive part of my brain, if I don't think through, oh boy, how did I do this? I mixed 50% burnt umber and 20% Payne's gray to get this color and that color. It just doesn't matter. At least not with the way my mind works. It's all about intuitively just working through the process and subconsciously letting it sink in. All right, so I have those clouds there, and I might put in, just for the sake of filling it in and not driving myself too nuts, I'll get some indication of the blue sky in the background. It also serves as a way to kind of key off the sky from a values perspective, to help ensure that, or at least roughly right, we get it close to what it needs to be. So I'm going to take a look at that real quick and bring the image into view. So that's not bad. Yeah, it's a little off. I'll take it. I might add a little tinge of ultramarine blue to get it a little closer. But for now, I'm not going to worry about it too much. Just going to rough it in. Yeah, I'm going to get a little bit more blue in there. Just a little bit. There we go. A lot of this is going to get covered up and ruined anyway, but it's really just an effort to kind of make sure I stay on track from a values perspective. Those of you that paint probably know that, generally speaking, in most instances, you're going to want the sky and a landscape painting to be the lightest value shape within the painting. Anywhere that you see sky holes or blue sky exposed, you're going to want that to be amongst, if not the lightest value. And we're going to start just working this in. There's little patches here, little lighter spots here. There we go. And we'll go ahead and just rough this up. We don't want that line to be too perfect, so we're going to use the paint that's on there to suggest some of these shapes within the shapes. Work efficiently, right? And if I don't nail these shapes now, it's no big deal. We could push this paint around. It's oil paint. I'm not using any medium other than linseed oil. That's how I like to paint. I know there's some advantages to using, some of those fancy mediums that are out there. It'll help paint dry faster, to help it stay wet longer, to create more translucency. All kinds of things you could do, terps and so forth. I have no interest in them right now. with where I am. You know, if I get to a point where I'm doing large commission landscapes and I have some specific ideas of effects that I'm looking to create, that might be a different story. For now, yeah, this is going to be my approach. As far as I see it, the fewer chemicals we involve in the process, the better off it is. All right, there we go. And we have, yeah, some little floaters here and there. And then we'll make sure we get some highlights going too. There we go. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and just come across the bottom of the sky and kind of loosen that up a little bit. And make sure that you can't really tell where the sky starts and the land begins. And we'll get some of that gray in here. And we'll use it here and indicate some of the trees and the tree line. Okay, fantastic. I like it. So we're coming in at 31 minutes, and you know, we have kind of an interesting painting emerging here. Probably not going to finish this tonight, just to keep this under an hour. That's my goal here with these live feeds. But we have a Jacob van Ruisdael painting, a copy of one anyway, kind of emerging here, which is nice, kind of nice. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this little brush here, and it's going to work into my Van Dyke Brown. We're going to work on some of these the shapes within the landmass here. And we're going to get some of my alizarin crimson in. This will pull these shapes forward. Also might, you know, allow the viewer to assume that, you know, maybe some of the tree shapes that are here, maybe there's some foliage, maybe there's some bushes and other things that have a little bit of a red tint to them too, and it'll pull that whole body a little bit forward. Go ahead and wipe this out a little bit and get some sap green mixed in. And I just want to make sure that this shape doesn't look too too inorganic. And we're going to get Van Dyke Brown worked in the back where, you know, there's some darker shadows, and there's definitely going to be an area that is out of the light that's darker here yet, and then here as well. We might get some blues in there and that sort of thing. Okay. Put that down. And we're going to go into I might use a palette knife. We're going to try and create the indication of some rocks. Palette knife can be useful for that. We're going to do that in this area. We're going to use a little bit of yellow ochre, a little bit of our alizarin crimson, and a little bit of our burnt umber. And we might use some pure yellow ochre as well. But we're going to come right across here. Try to create the indication of some, looks like almost like a cap of a rock, maybe the top of a hill or a mountain or a little bit of a plateau. And then we'll work back and forth between mainly 3 colors. We're going to have kind of a lighter orange. We're going to work some grays back in. Mix in a little bit more yellow ochre from time to time. And we'll go back into our gray. And we'll rough this up a little bit before we're done to make it look a little bit more like an organic rock formation. But for now, just want to rough it in. In general, I'm going to hold off. That's one of the things with oil painting and painting in other media too, mediums rather, tend to want to hold off on the brightest highlights until the very end. Definitely doing that here. So in instances where things might get a little too intense, you might see me just scrape things off. If there's just a little too much intensity or portions that are a little too large where there's high intensity colors, you might see me scrape it off, and that's just to kind of bring it back a little bit, knock it back just a little bit, because we don't necessarily want to be there quite yet at this point in time. Just making a mess. There you go. Right. Now, I think what we'll do is, while I have this, I'll rough up some of this tree line area just a little bit. That'll all likely get covered for the most part. We're just creating some texture. You know, maybe it'll trick the mind down the road into thinking there's a lot more effort to build in more detail. I'm going to block in one large dark shape. I'm going to use the fan brush here. It's one of the larger shapes. It is a large, massive trees off to the right here. That's going to go behind the little castle. So we're going to get some Payne's gray and probably some burnt umber and sap green. And we're going to go ahead and just get a little shape in there just by using the fan brush on its side. Just getting the general shape. That's all. Most of that's going to get covered. And I'm going to darken it a little bit in the center of that shape with some Payne's gray and maybe a little bit of ultramarine blue even. And I'll drag that same color across the bottom of the tree line here. And we'll put some touches of it off into this distant tree line as well. Okay. I'm going to set that aside. think what we'll do is refusing the urge here to use much smaller brushes to get some of the detail, and that's always something that seems to happen when I'm painting, and I imagine it happens to a lot of painters. But what I'm going to do is get some of the lighter colors worked in to the landscape. So what I see here, I'm not going to put the brightest highlights in, but I do see some striations, and I see some darker greens and some lighter greens. I see some lighter grays, some lighter greens, lighter grays, lighter blue off into the distance here. So we're going to try and get some of those in. Not the brightest of the highlights, but at least part of the way there. So I have some yellow ochre and some titanium white, and then a little bit of the pre-mixed yellow ochre and alizarin crimson. I'm going to use that just to get some interesting shapes into that field, some changes of color temperature. It's a little warmer. I'm going to use that here. I'm going to use that within and amongst this little forest. And the paint is kind of running out my brush, and I'm going to use that to my advantage. My strokes will be have a little less strength in them. Now, I'm going to take that same color, and I'm going to get a little bit of ultramarine blue in there to cool it off. And gray it out. And we're going to work back just a little bit. We're going to get some indication of that here in this tree line. Not everywhere, just in a few spots. And if you're joining just now, just know that what we're doing here is covering a master copy, a great Dutch painter by the name of Jacob van Ruisdael. Let me get rid of that little splotch of gray there. And by no means is this a scientific effort, just using our intuition to kind of work through some of the problems that will come up if we were to try and create this sort of painting in the field. And maybe better understand the approach that he took, although the original was done in the 1600s, so we really have no way of knowing. All right, so everything's covered. We have a layer of paint covering the whole canvas. We have a couple of shapes that are not in there quite yet, and that includes some of the distant mountain ranges, some of the ruins that are part of the original. You can see there's what appears to be a church and a castle, and we may or may not add those in. We'll see. Those might be some of the last elements that we get in. For the most part, what I am after is getting a better understanding of how he achieved three things, I should say. This wonderful sky. He was known for painting beautiful sky scenes, the depth in this painting, and how he's able to achieve it, and the overall mood. It is a little moody. There's some hope with the breaks in the clouds and the light casting down on the fields and those sorts of things, but it's a little moody, and just really a thought experiment on how we might approach this if we had the opportunity to paint a scene like this. That's really what this is all about. And let's see, I'm gonna bring some of this gray up like this just a little bit, I'm thinking there's a cast shadow on part of that area in that shape in the field. Same here. And this will help when we go to put in the final highlights. They'll look a lot more intense. Okay, good. Happy with that. And we got some of this here. Why waste paint? We have it on there. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead. I think what we'll do now is go back up into the sky. And just going to wipe out this brush a little bit. We're going to start putting some of the lighter tones in. We're going to hold off on getting some of the golden yellow ochre hues that you see bouncing around. We're just going to lighten up some of those areas first. I want to get some light grays and titanium white based light grays. Just mixing titanium white with Payne's gray. Much lighter value than is in there right now. Into the atmosphere here, and then I'll come over it with that yellow ochre later on. I want to avoid having a big, messy, muddy, green tinted massive clouds, and you know, I'm thinking if I were to, just based upon past experience, if I were to lay in, if I were to jump the gun and lay in some of that yellow ochre, that's probably what would end up happening. So I'm going to avoid that. Get some more of this on there. It's funny, sometimes when you're working with electronics, using an electronic-based reference photo, and things happen like maybe the formatting of the image on screen changes, it gives you perspective into how adjustments to the composition and design of the painting would impact the painting. And I just saw something which was kind of interesting. My screen shrunk unexpectedly, and it gave me some insight into what it would look like if the format was such that it cut off the top part of the sky, and it actually looked quite good. All right. Nothing's final here. Every decision I make, these are not final decisions, but I'm just laying in paint, and I'll probably adjust these shapes and these lines a couple times before I wrap up. I don't think I'll get this done in one sitting. This paint will still be wet in the morning, so I'll have the luxury if I wake up early enough and get moving, where I might be able to finish this in the morning. But I get as far as I can. I'll probably paint for another 9 or 10 minutes or so before I knock off. And if you missed it earlier, I wanted to share with you next week I plan the same time, 9 p.m. almost every Wednesday. I do a walkthrough of some process or some book. Sometimes I do book readings. Next week I'm thinking I'm going to cover J.W. Turner's drawing book. So there's a lot of really good information in here and some wonderful images of his drawings, many of which were etchings, some of which were watercolor paintings, over drawings. I might do a quick walkthrough of that next week and maybe try my hand at a smaller line and wash type painting, similar to what he has going on in amongst some of his drawings in that book. So if you're interested, come join us again. Also check out some of the other videos. I've been doing a lot of time-lapse shorts, mainly because they seem to be helping the channel grow. Something weird going on or different going on with the algorithms. Just trying to adjust. At this point, after just a couple years, got up to 1,000 subscribers. Appreciate that. For a little guy like me, that's a big accomplishment. So I appreciate anybody who's taken interest in my art, for sure, and some of the things that I share here. So thank you. And so every Wednesday, I'm going to try and be as consistent as I can with these walkthroughs. Hopefully, sharing things that are interesting. And the other video content ranges from long form video, where I'll actually pre-record and narrate the process of covering a painting like this from an old master or an original painting. Today I did a little painting of a bird, a titmouse, and it was in pastel, and that's my favorite medium. Reason being, I think it's more sentimental. It's also a control thing as well. I feel like I have as much control with soft pastels as I do with a pencil. And sentimental because it's how I kind of stayed in contact with my creative side when I was commuting a lot and we had young kids and we were extraordinarily busy. All right. Made some pretty good progress here. Quite happy. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. I'm going to go in, and before I knock off, I'm going to get some of the darker lowlights enhanced here with some Payne's Gray and Burnt Umber and Ultramarine Blue. I'm going to keep it thin. So here, oops, too thin. Yeah, sometimes when there's too much linseed oil, the paint, there we go, doesn't adhere the way you want it to. But I'm going to get some of this in. We'll see what happens, and I might end up rubbing some of it off if I can't get it as dark as I'd like to, and I think that's what I'm going to do. So what I'll do is, because I'm painting on a surface that's painted with black gesso, when I rub off paint, it reveals what will be the darkest value in the painting. So that's what I did. I rubbed off a couple layers of sap green and ultramarine blue and some Payne's Gray because it wasn't quite dark enough. And there we go. Those areas right there, that band of trees, I want to be amongst the darkest values in the painting. I'm going to do the same here. And I'm going to do the same here. There we go. It also enhances the shape. It creates a little bit of energy that wasn't there before. I'm going to change the shape a little bit. There we go. And there we go. All right, I'm liking that right now a lot better than I did before. It's about 4 minutes left to paint. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe out this brush. I'm going to get some blue-gray and try and refine those mountains off into the distance a little bit. And I'm going to get a little bit of red. We're going to make this a little purple. There we go. A little bit more alizarin crimson. ultramarine blue. There we go. I think it's a little better. I have like a little bit of a purpley gray. And it might be a little too saturated. That's okay. A lot of this will get covered up. And we're going to vary the temperature a little bit. Maybe we'll exaggerate the height of this mountain just a little bit relative to the original. Why not? Who doesn't like big mountains off in the distance? A little bit of this gray toward the bottom. And then once again, we're going to take our handy dandy paper towel. We're going to go down to the black, or near to the black surface underneath, because we painted this paper we're painting on with black gesso and let it dry. And then we're going to do the same here, not quite as hard, not quite as much pressure. Toward the bottom of these mountain ranges, we're going to just let some of that black underpainting of that acrylic gesso come through toward the mountain ranges might be meeting the bottom of the rolling hill there. There we go. Okay. And we're at 10 o'clock, so we're working at this for an hour. We'll probably finish this in a second setting. What you'll likely see me do in short order here is put in some of the highlights. So for example, I might take some of my light gray, lighten it a little bit more, and you might see me come around to some of the edges of the clouds and just suggest that some of the light, more intense light, is bouncing off within and amongst some of these cloud shapes here with a little bit more intensity. Yeah, not a perfect outline by any means, just an indication. Of some more intense light bouncing through here. That's all. And then we'll probably work back and forth across that several times with and rebuild some of the darker shapes that we've, a little too much brown in there. I'm going to wipe that out. okay to have a little bit, but for the most part I want that to be dominated by Payne's gray. And we'll rebuild some of this darker value here. That'll help intensify those lighter areas, and we'll continue to do that. And opportunistically we'll break up some of these large shapes that seem just a little too solid. And we'll work to soften this up quite a bit. Before we wrap up, that's for sure. If nothing else, just by doing this, I've already learned that I can achieve a lot of the sky effects that I'd like to incorporate into some future paintings already, even though I haven't finished this painting, just by virtue of spending a little time just playing around. So that in and of itself, makes this process of doing these master copies well worth it, I think. So, I would never sell this painting. I would never offer it up for sale. It's not mine to give and present as my own idea, but what it does is it pays dividends, because it'll positively impact future paintings that I do that are originals. No doubt about that. All right, so when we come back to this tomorrow, I'll work on building some more three-dimensionality to the clouds. I'll look to enhance some of the light effects on the field and on the rocks and in the trees. And if I can make quick work of that and some of the other things I'd like to accomplish, I will go ahead and put in the castle and also the ruins of the church, I believe, that are there. Before I do that, before I shut down for the night, I'm just gonna take this 1-inch bristle brush. It's clean, soft. And I'm just gonna try and soften, before there's any chance for it to dry at all, this first kind of initial layer of cloud shapes. Just want to soften it a little bit while it is still very wet. And that'll only help me build three-dimensional illusions in these clouds when I come back to this, because it'll help these shapes that I've already put down drop back because there'll be softer edges, both the outer edges of all the shapes and within and amongst the shapes within the shape. So it'll push this back. So anything I paint on top of it will look like it's coming forward. I think it also helps get us closer to the nature of clouds, which are, it's water vapor, it's gas, so it's floating out there. Doesn't have a steady, constant shape. It obviously is not a solid, so it helps better reflect the nature of clouds too. So this will be the last thing I do tonight, and we'll come back and we'll look to get some of those highlights incorporated into this painting and some of those man-made structures perhaps as well. Thanks for hearing me out. Thanks for joining me. Join me again nearly every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every Wednesday. And we'll walk through some process like this, like covering a great master work, in this case, a great Dutch painter, and or we'll walk through a book or some other thing that I'm working on in the studio. Thanks again for joining. I hope you have a great night. Sorry I went a little bit over. Hopefully you got some value out of this. If you did, consider liking the video, sharing it with friends that you think might find it interesting, or even subscribe if you haven't already to my channel. That'll help me reach more viewers, which is something that's always good for artists like us. Have a wonderful night. You take care.